Today we're going to make pastry cream. I'm using light cream because of the virus. I couldn't find half and half, which I prefer. A lot of people use milk. So pastry cream is basically a filling for our cakes, our cream puffs, our eclairs. And it's a pudding. Why is it a pudding? Because it is starch filled. So I have a pot on the stove with my light cream and half the sugar. I have a bowl with my other half of sugar, my eggs and egg yolks, and my cornstarch sifted. But I like to sift this twice, and I'll show you why. Because as it's coming through, you will have chunks of cornstarch that will not always cook out. So if you look in the strainer here, I'm gonna keep an eye on my cream while it's on the stove too, because any type of dairy product on the stove you don't want to walk away from, because if it starts to boil, you'll decorate your kitchen.
Go up to whatever number 8 I'm doing.
So people have asked me, well, what's the difference between this and say creme brulee? Creme brulee is a custard. Cream, sugar, egg yolks.
72.
The yolks will thicken as the custard bakes in the oven. There's no starch in there. Rice pudding, bread pudding, pastry cream, those are all starch puddings. So I could also take this when it's done, melt some nice chocolate, and I would have some nice chocolate pastry cream. So this is why I pass this through a strainer. You can see those chunks in there, okay, which I don't want. I want to dissolve those before they get into my final product here. Some of them won't go through, then I know they're too large, so I'm just going to discard those. Now, because there's a starch in here, I can add this straight to the cream when it boils. However, if I don't have a starch and I'm doing a creme anglaise, which is a stirred custard, or a creme brulee, which is a baked custard, I want to temper my eggs or egg yolks and my cream. And what do I mean by tempering? Well, I'm taking something hot, I'm adding it to something cold, I'm making it warm. So something hot to something cold, this becomes warm, goes back to a hot stove. Now, in this recipe, the yolks are stabilized and the eggs are stabilized by the cream. So I could simply just pour this like this, but if I was going to temper it, I'm going to go a little hot into my cold, equal out the temperature as when I'm doing a custard, because I don't want to curdle the eggs. Now this comes to a boil. Now I go back to a hot stove. Now how will I know my pudding is cooked? Well, right now it just looks like a very loose milkshake. Okay, but just like flour does when it's used as a roux, as a thickener, as the starch heats up and begins to thicken, comes close to the boiling point, it'll thicken the pudding, and then I'll know that my pudding is done. So I'm just going to stir this. I don't want to walk away from this. It'll start from the outside. I'll lower my heat, and when I see bubbles on the side like that, that tells me my starch is activated and my pudding is not going to get any thicker. If I was to leave this on the stove, it'll just simply burn and stick. And that's our pastry cream, which we have many, many applications for in school. So we'll let that cool, and we have pastry cream. That's going to go into the cake that we're making later. And tomorrow we'll get to decorate it and put the whole thing together. So now I'm going to leave it to cool. Before it does that, I'm going to take some butter. Some people add the butter right on the stove. I add a couple tablespoons afterwards. We're just going to stir that in until it melts. And we have a nice smooth pastry cream. Now obviously this couldn't go in our cream puffs or our cake until it was cooled. Why? Because if it's not cooled and it's hot, it's going to heat up our product, be our cake or our cream puff, and it's not going to stay, it's not going to set. So we allow this to set, it'll get much thicker. Now in the event this got too thick, Simply take a little fresh whipped cream, thin it out a little bit, and that's it there. I'm gonna pour it into another container, and we're gonna let it cool, and now we have pastry cream.